even as New York City is set to enter phase 3 of its reopening plan next week, and many city residents begin to feel a stronger sense of normalcy, the economic recovery won't look the same for everyone. A new study reveals that half of New York City's immigrants are now unemployed, many of them ineligible for public benefits, and as a result, struggling to put food on the table. NBC's Ron Allen has done extensive reporting for us on this very important story, and he joins us now live from Queens. Ron?
Nicole, yes, there is an economic disaster that is unfolding here. It's been unfolding for some time, and it's hard to see it here. There's a lot of vibrancy going on, but if you look beneath the surface, there's a huge number of people who are unemployed. There's also a spike in the sickness, it appears, perhaps. We just looked at some recent numbers that say that there were 36 people who died in this part of Queens, Corona, Elmhurst, one of the hardest hit areas, last week, which seems like a relatively high number given that the rest of the city is reopening. So here you have a lot of leaders who are essentially crying out for help for their community.
Check the line outside.
Every day before noon, hundreds line up outside Catalina Cruz's office in Corona. The Queens lawmaker has set up her own food pantry to help her neighbors.
Señores, 6 pies de distancia, por favor. 6 feet apart, please.
The city's reopening, the country's reopening, but there's still this.
Yes, because what happens in our community is the majority of people didn't qualify for any of the financial help that's out there.
Corona is a densely packed community with immigrants working low-income jobs, mostly in transportation or healthcare, making them especially vulnerable to the virus and leading to one of the highest infection rates and number of COVID-related deaths per capita in the country. Many here used to work in a vibrant cash economy, off the books, like this woman who's undocumented and now ineligible for government help.
The restaurant where I used to work is permanently closed now.
Cruz knows her plight very well.
My mom was a street vendor. My mom was a nanny. She cleaned people's homes.
Cruz was just 9 when her mother brought her here from Colombia. She's now the first former Dreamer ever elected to state office in New York.
Where's your husband and the baby?
And now crying out for help for her community.
When you see this and what you've seen over the last few months, how does that make you feel?
It's gut-wrenching because there's only but so much I can do for folks.
New York's Department of Small Business Services tells NBC News Cruz's borough of Queens got about 16% of the recovery loans issued by the city. Manhattan, the wealthiest area, got 57%, and the Bronx, the city's poorest area, received just 2%.
The Bronx, for decades, has always been the last to get help.
Michael Blake, Cruz's Bronx colleague, says deep systemic inequalities have made surviving COVID even more difficult.
Our kids were trying to figure out remote learning, but had 2 months before everyone had their actual tablets. You can't tell people to be socially distant in a house where there's 5, 6, 7 people in the home.
Through it all, places like Mott Haven Bar and Grill does what it can to survive, like making meals for a nonprofit that serves New Yorkers in need.
Will your business survive?
If it wasn't because of the essential meals, no. If this stops, I don't think I can survive.
So without this, you're in deep trouble.
Oh, yeah. I'm trying to remain positive.
Thank you.
The restaurant's meals go to places like Cruz's office food pantry, where here and at so many other places in New York's most vulnerable neighborhoods, lines still stretch around the block.
So a lot of people are struggling in the so-called outer boroughs, the most vulnerable communities around New York City. There are some statistics that suggest that in the Bronx, where we just were, 70% of the restaurants may not reopen because they just can't get going. We also understand there's some numbers that suggest that in Queens, as many as half the small businesses may have to close as well. So it's a struggle. It's happening in the shadows in some cases, and that's why these communities are hoping to get some help.